I love talking about water, of course. This is my element of choice. And there's something very interesting about water in general. It actually carries a lot of energy. If you think about it, water can both be fluid and flow freely, or it can have the powerful strength of a river. It can be both cold and hot. It can be soft and hard. And just by a single ripple, you can create a massive wave. Now, water is, of course, the source of life. And as a matter of fact, this is what our planet looks like from space. We look like a blue marble. And it's a good reason for this. We're actually 70% water, our planet is. And it just so turns out that not only is our blue planet 70% water, but so too is our mind, our heart, our lungs, and our body. 70% water. And so we follow the water to find life in the universe. We come back to water to reconnect to ourselves. And so it's a very real thing that we are actually water people. So in order to connect back to who we are, we're going to take a moment to remember our water. So I'd like you all to just close your eyes and think back to your most memorable experience with water. Think about what the day was like, who you were with, what you were doing. And just immerse yourself in that water just for a moment. Now you can open your eyes. When I look around the room, I see a lot of smiles come up on your faces, but I also see some of you kind of fidgeting. Maybe there's a little anxiety involved with that first memory with water. But the neat thing about water is that no matter what, it makes us feel something, and we each have a water story. So here is my water story. Oop, there we go. This is where it began. It's little, we look alike, right? So I'm actually born in the Andes Mountains of Colombia. I was born in Bogota, Colombia. And at 6 months old, we didn't have a bathtub, and so mom would just bathe me in a green plastic bucket, as you see here. And this was a photo that was taken very shortly after she had just turned around to grab a towel to dry me off, and she told me to hold on to the sides. And then to her horror, when she turned around, I am underwater. And she immediately thought like, oh my God, in no time I just drowned my baby. But I popped out and I was so happy and I was beaming and I was giggling. And we'd like to say that this was the moment that I first discovered water. Oh, excuse me. Oh, there we go. Actually, I'm more comfortable. There we go. I'm just going to go. So this is then me, fast forward a little bit. This is at the age of 3. And the image quality here is a little funny, but the idea was, I actually remember this day. This was when I first learned how to swim. And I remember not only was I the littlest one in the swimming pool, but I was actually the only one who could swim across the entire length of the pool. And one of the things that was so clear to me after this day was driving home, and I earned a little badge because I had swum across the pool, and I was the only one to do it. And I remember feeling so incredibly proud, and again, that feeling of happiness came over me. And this was when I knew I was going to be a swimmer for the rest of my life. So I ended up becoming a competitive swimmer starting at a very young age. I swam at the University of Delaware, my undergrad, fighting blue hens. Such a random mascot, but there we go. And even to this day, that's one of my favorite things to do is swim out here in open water. So if any of you open water swimmers, please let me know. We'll go out there together. Now fast forward a couple years, by the time I was 8 years old, this is when I discovered reruns of The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And this is what really blew my mind. Not only did I discover that you could spend all of this time underwater in your bathing suit. I literally wanted to live in my bathing suit by this point, by the age of 8. So not only did I discover that I could have a career that would allow me to live in my bathing suit and spend all this time in the water, but it also meant I could spend that time studying animals, learning about them, and then also learning how to protect them and protect the oceans. And that career was known as marine biology. And so this is when I knew I was going to be a marine biologist, when I was 8. Fast forward about 25 years, and I found myself underwater here in Fort Lauderdale. I've moved down here about 12 years ago to go to graduate school at the Nova Southeastern University Oceanographic Center, just down the road. That's how I met Dr. Derek, as a matter of fact. And I went there to earn my Master's of Science in Marine Biology and Coastal Zone Management. And I studied coral reefs and coral restoration in particular. And it was extremely rewarding. After graduate school, I continued on as a research scientist, and I was diving all up and down the Florida Keys, Miami, Broward County, even up into West Palm Beach, studying the corals. And I found myself one day at the beach, and I had my Master's of Science in one hand in marine biology. I had hundreds of scuba dives under my belt from all of the dives, all the work I had done underwater. I had written thousands of words in scientific publications and reviews and reports, but yet I remember literally looking all around me and realizing that right there on Fort Lauderdale Beach, between tourists and locals alike, nobody around me knew that within swimming distance from shore exists the third largest barrier reef in the world, right there, just out of sight, out of mind. And that's when I realized that I needed to do something a little bit different, that I wasn't quite making the impacts that I wanted to. And so that's when I started focusing a lot of my attention on reconnecting people to water, and by using my voice to do that. So since October of this last year, as Evan said, I've traveled over 17,000 nautical miles, speaking on cruise ships like Holland America and American Cruise Line, reconnecting people to water, bringing this underwater world to them in an effort to promote understanding and caring and action for these really amazing underwater environments. And it has been such a joy for me because the world underwater is like nowhere else you will ever see or experience. And for those of you who are scuba divers, any scuba divers? You know what I mean. But the idea is that underwater, you see colors and textures and patterns like you don't see anywhere else on Earth. Underwater is one of the only times that your body finally gets to take a breath, finally gets to relax. And just sitting in your seats right now, for instance, your body's using thousands of muscles and tendons to keep you upright. But underwater, your body finally gets a break, and you finally get to release that because you're floating. It's the only place on this planet where you can float, where you can feel the freedom of weightlessness. So it's been an incredible journey, and I became this speaker at sea very serendipitously. It actually turned out that I was invited by local travel professional Natalie Buto to join her on a Holland America cruise line. And we were capturing some videos for some promo work she wanted to do for some upcoming retreats. So we were up at the very top deck, and we were just capturing some final shots there. We were, I think, the last ones off the ship. And I remember that she started talking to somebody, this really tall, kind gentleman, and she brought me over, and we all had a wonderful conversation, and I was able to talk to him about conservation and sustainability, and even point out that my university was right there, because we were just right here in Port Everglades. And it was really great. We had a great connection. I left him with my business card and with one of these blue marbles that I always carry around. And then a few months later, I found myself actually on a Holland America cruise line as a speaker. He had invited me to join the cruise line as their guest speaker, as their onboard marine biologist. And it was all because of that single moment where I happened to share that one conversation and one blue marble with the right person at the right time. And of course, it was very intimidating because Holland America is a cruise line that's about 2,000 passengers. I would end up giving dozens of lectures to audiences of hundreds of people on a raised stage, double balcony. That was my first experience ever serving as a speaker at sea. And it was definitely much bigger than I had ever imagined. I actually didn't even think you could do this as a job, or that it was even an option. And what's so even more precious about it is that my office, when I was in graduate school, literally looked out onto Port Everglades. So every day I would see cruise ships and commercial ships coming in and out. And so to be on that other side and to actually be on the cruise ship talking to these folks was a real treat. It was really exciting. This ended up sparking such a curiosity that I ended up following my curiosity and looking for more opportunities after that. After the Holland America trip, I was actually going through the Panama Canal from Fort Lauderdale to San Diego. And it was fantastic. I loved it. I was so energized. I had to keep looking for more experiences to do that. So that's how then I was invited to join the Pearl Seas and circumnavigate Cuba, doing very similar work. So there, again, I got to speak to hundreds of people on these cruise ships about the coral reefs of Cuba, which, by the way, are some of the most pristine in the entire Caribbean. And it's a very special place and a very special environment that they have there. So I was able to bring that ecosystem to life for these passengers. And then from there, I ended up being invited to Puget Sound. I cruised up the Inside Passage to Alaska. And then most recently, I was just over on the Maine coast, cruising in and out of the little harbors there. Again, this time with American Cruise Lines, speaking aboard their ship, reconnecting people to water and bringing this underwater world to them. So it's been an incredible journey. It's been so much fun. And most recently, I'm really excited to share, I've been super energized with work that I've been doing with Richard Branson's newest ship, Virgin Voyages. They'll be coming out to Miami in April. And I'm also super energized to have partnered with La Mer Excursions, and I'll be doing some eco cruises and aerial eco tours with them. And what's really neat about this particular travel agency is that they are the first travel group here in Florida to receive the coveted Travel Life Certified Sustainability Award. So not only are we reconnecting people to nature, but we're actually doing so in a way that has less impact on the environment and that is very sustainable. And it's so incredible that this opportunity has come my way. Now, of course, none of this would be possible without this guy, without my fiancé, Paya Ponte, without his support. And I so thank you for always being there with me. And it's an amazing thing to have a partner like this in your life that you can co-captain, you can literally co-create this kind of beautiful life with. And it's probably the thing I'm most energized about is, of course, turns out there's a baby in here. It's no longer a beer belly. So in October, just a couple weeks away, we're gonna be excited to welcome our own little water baby into the world. And it's so energizing to also have him be a part of this lens, of this perspective, that there's so much possibility. Because really along the way, one of the things that I've learned is that every time that I speak, every time that I've had an opportunity to be in front of people and share my passion and my expertise, I've realized that it's led to something, that it's led to action, that it truly has been a real ripple effect that I've seen along the way. There was a woman in Alaska that I met, and she was a cultural ambassador for the local Tlingit community. Interestingly, Tlingit these are people who are considered the people of the tides. They're so connected to water. They believe that when the glaciers calve, it's their ancestors speaking to them. They've seen the changes in the glacier action, and they've seen the melting. And there's one glacier in particular that we would always visit there in Alaska that used to be connected at the base of the mountain, but because the glaciers have receded so much, it no longer has that connection. And so the Tlingit people actually, when they talk about that glacier, it saddens them because they say that the glacier is no longer holding hands. But her role was to come on board and bring us into their culture and into their stories. And I had seen her speak before, and I noticed that she was in the audience one time when I was speaking about how water makes us happy, how water makes us better. This is one of the talks that I love to give. And the next time I saw her speak, something had changed. She was pouring forth with so much passion in her words. And she told her story very differently. And she told of the connection that she had to water specifically. And she told of how the people of the tides were now living amongst these changes that were happening up in Alaska. And it was a really powerful talk. And you could really see that the people in the audience, they weren't just there experiencing it, they were actually there hearing. They could actually hear her this time. They were hearing her words. And I joked with her, I said, oh, maybe they had their hearing aids turned up. But I said to her afterwards, I'm like, wow, that was such a beautiful talk. I could see such a big difference. Where is the change? What happened? And she actually said that it was after seeing one of my talks that she was so moved to incorporate more of that water piece into her own talk, that she actually changed her talk and made it more powerful and made it come from her voice in a very different way. And that was when it really hit me that how incredible it is that I may just be one person, but yet I could make that impact on somebody else. And how her giving her talk to hundreds of people every single week was then inspiring them and touching them in a new way. And that was such an incredible moment to come to that realization. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's exactly what it's all about. It's that single moment that creates this ripple of change. And that's something that we actually have control over. So, like the canals here in the Venice of the Americas, we are now all connected. Being here in this room, we're all connected. And what if you were to follow your curiosity? What if you were to become a wave maker for somebody else and create a moment like that for somebody else? And what if we could each create just a single ripple that would produce a wave of impacts, not only for your family, your colleagues, your community, and maybe even the world? And that is just something that I'm so excited about, I'm so energized about. And I know that what I have done has just been all the result of a single little moment, that one moment that happened to start with the blue marble. So consider, what is your blue marble? And how will you start that ripple of change? Thank you.
Go, girl.
Hey.
Amazing. If you didn't know why we do this talk, aside from to connect, engage, and inspire you guys, and why we bring in different speakers, we're all alike, right? We're all human beings. And I told you I was going to say this, but there's so many marine biologists, Stacy, Paola, that go to school, get great education, Nova Southeastern University, and unfortunately there's just not that many jobs in the field available for them. But as Paola's been able to do, and as Stacy, our education coordinator for the Thousand Mermaids, has been able to do with the Urban Farming Institute, they've been able to find ways to pursue their passion creatively, not the traditional path of going to work for the university and a research center, but as Paola just highlighted, you can pursue your craft, you can pursue your passion. I was not in art 3 years ago. I was not in marine biology 2 years ago. And it's just one ripple that leads to that next change. So hopefully with talks like this, and you'll pick up a nugget of information or a nugget of insight that maybe you'll pursue your creative outlet, or something that was meaningful to you as a child that maybe it's not the traditional path, but maybe you can navigate your way there. So I wanted to make a point to say that. Before we open up for question and answers, I would just like you to just give a quick 30-second, 60-second bit on why the coral reefs are so important.
Oh, I mean, my pleasure. I can do it in 30 seconds too. Coral reefs are obviously the most important thing that we have on this planet. Not only do they provide us with food, they provide us with coastal protection, they provide us with barriers underwater, but more importantly, they provide us with awe. You see, like I said, on coral reefs, they're considered the rainforests of the sea because they're so incredibly biodiverse. The colors, the textures, the patterns we see underwater on a coral reef are unlike anywhere else you'll see. And we're now even finding medicines that come from coral reefs. And how lucky are we to have the third largest barrier reef right here in our backyard. And although it's out of sight, out of mind, it's still very accessible. And so I think coral reefs just really enhance our lives and definitely enhance South Florida. And also for y'all to know that they don't only exist in the Keys. We do have them right here too. So make sure, I'm happy to take y'all out anytime you want to go snorkeling.
And in Southeast Florida alone, NOAA estimates, and the numbers always change, it's anywhere from an $8.5 billion economic impact on our economy that supports over 70,000 jobs, from sport fish captains to dive shops and so many other things in between. So, and all of this, the turtles as well, play a part of the bigger picture of the circle of life. And when you disrupt the circle of life, things change. And unfortunately, our reefs right now are in really bad shape due to climate change. There's no arguing it, there's no disputing it. The water temperatures are rising, the reefs are dying. If the reefs die, and which hopefully won't happen, but it's projected to at the current moment, so many unfortunate things will happen in terms of we'll lose some of that coastline protection, shoreline protection. Thousands of species of fish that find their home on the reef are not going to be able to grow from juvenile to adult fish, and that provides food for so many communities that rely on the reef. And as she mentioned, and as a lot of people that are in the space know, the reefs are out of sight, out of sight, out of mind. So it's really important that we work to protect that. That's why we came up with this creative project called 1,000 Mermaids, where we cast local people in the form of mermaids, create these big sculptures that we put underwater that have all these cool restoration initiatives. We have a lot of education and citizen science opportunities for middle school, high school students, veterans, and everybody else alike. If that's of interest to you, feel free to talk to me or Stacy afterwards, and we can help get your kids certified in scuba diving. They can help us save the reefs. But without much further ado, I'd like to open it up to question and answers from the audience here.
Thank you. Yes, hi.
So, first question I have is, what are the circumstances that are making the coral reefs in Cuba so pristine, and just a few hundred miles away it's a disaster?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, what is it about Cuba and their coral reefs that is so different from what we have here? A lot of it has to do with the population. So we don't see as much coastal construction and development over in Cuba as we do here, of course. And another interesting piece about it has to do actually with the Soviet Union. And so once the Soviets left in the 90s, they also took with them all of their farming equipment and all of their fertilizers. And so it kind of forced Cuba to return back to organic agriculture. And as a result, they've used less fertilizer, less pesticides, and they're going back to this more traditional way of farming. And so we see less runoff from land-based sources, particularly agriculture, impacting the reefs. Just like we have seen our sargassum seaweed bloom out of control here, just as we've seen with the red tide situation going on the West Coast, less coastal development, less agriculture runoff, and they have quite a bit of conservation measures there. They have two very large coral reef systems on the south side and the north side of the island. And on the south side, that coral reef system is about 50 miles from shore. And so luckily, there is a little bit less impact out there. That's the kind of coral reef where when you dive there, not only do you see corals and the colors of the corals and fishes swimming out, but you see sharks, all different species of sharks. You see sea turtles, you see big predators that we are lacking here. So it truly is a very dynamic system. It's still in place, and a lot of it has to do with that less input. And that's a big reason too why the idea of collaboration between our countries is such an important piece, because we need to learn from Cuba. A lot of what's happening in Cuba actually seeds our coral reefs here. Even the fishes over there will get seeded over here on our side. So we have a lot to learn from them, and we're hoping that despite the embargo, we'll continue to open those doors of communication and collaboration. Yes, hi.
So I cherish those moments that you talk about, right? Those moments of serendipity, and then I also think there's intentionality involved. And one of those things that I have admired about you is that how I remember that you had these like strong vision and intentions, and that you helped manifest that. And I think that comes up with you, with Evan, with Andrew, the things that they're doing, and for creatives here too, of having a vision and then manifesting that. So can you share more about the vision you had to help manifest that, and maybe the vision you continue to have to personally and professionally? How do you think it's successful?
Thank you for that question. Speaking about vision and intentionality, It's not an easy place to get to. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of inward focus, but it's all about coming to that piece of clarity. And that's exactly, I think, why that particular moment on that Holland America cruise ship worked so perfectly as it did, because I had already had the vision. I knew that I wanted to make a bigger impact for our oceans, that despite all of these efforts, all of my educational, my academic training, and all of the publications I had produced, despite that, I still wasn't making an impact. I wasn't reaching the people I wanted to. And so the vision was actually very loose. It was just I just wanted to make a bigger impact. I wanted to get in front of more people. The how sometimes doesn't quite matter. You don't have a full picture of what that looks like because you don't know what the hows could be. I had no idea that you could be a speaker at sea. My first time on a cruise ship was last March. And so even not being so fixated on the how, but holding the intention of the vision of what kind of experience do you want to have? That's a big question that I always ask. It's not necessarily what goal do I want to achieve, but what kind of experience do I want to have? What kind of feeling do I want to have from that? And what kind of impact then do I want to create from there? And when you have that kind of clarity and something that's very tangible that you can pass around, then it really does help your message stick. And again, you can keep it simple, but specific. Those are some really good, those are some tips that I've come across, is that when you're considering what it is you want to do, what kind of impact you want to make, just keep it simple but specific. Don't worry about the how, and make it tangible, make it memorable. And actually, along the lines of these blue marbles, I do have a whole bunch of them in a blue bag in the back for all of you as my gift to you. So make sure you grab one. Yes?
Yeah. Do you have experience with mud balls?
I do not. Tell me more.
Essential microorganisms
Okay.
that you literally have classrooms, put the EMs into mud balls, because what they found is that by putting them into mud, they sink to the bottom of the lake, and that the EMs kind of gobble up the runoff from all these fertilizers and stuff. It's huge in Japan, and the problem is the EPA and putting something in the water, and the FDA and everybody else that gets involved. But I don't know if some of you guys with your contacts and permits could actually put good, essential microorganisms. You just put them, literally, there's a formula to put them in mud balls, and you get the kids to start throwing them in all of these places where you've got the canals full of runoff and stuff. But the problem's always been permit and permissions.
Right, yeah, of course. And I mean, obviously those permits and permissions are in place for a good reason. And there's all kinds of ideas, innovative ideas that are coming out. And that's a good point to be said that it is beneficial to look outside of our own little bubble to see what other industries, what other sectors are doing. That's actually another piece speaking about here, about Creative Zen, is something that's so neat about here. What makes it so useful is that although I'm coming from a science background, we are all here from all different kinds of sectors, and the messages that are relayed through these conversations really do go beyond these boundaries, and so we can truly learn from one another in that way. So that's something I haven't heard of yet, so thank you for sharing.
Well, because I'm into permaculture, so essential microorganisms are important on land, but they work the same way in the water, and essentially if you just pour them on top, they just clean the top layer, but by putting them in literally mud, then they sink to the bottom, and it's so ironic.
I'll have to look into it, yeah.
They can put all the fertilizer and pollution in without permits, but then to try to clean it up, we're the ones that are hog-tied,
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Related, you said the how. I was wondering about the word sustainability and your connection with it and your corporate new friendships. Can you tell us a little more about sustainability and more hows?
Yes, absolutely. So sustainability, when we talk about sustainability, it's really all about how we can live in harmony with our environment. And of course here, being such a huge coastal community, it's really talking about being an ocean steward. So little things that we can do in our everyday lives is even just planting native gardens. Native gardens are a really great way to not only promote migratory bird species, promote pollinators back into our communities, but also you're using less fertilizer, less waste, and less water. So it's cheaper and there's less runoff, less toxic runoff that's making its way into our water systems.
Turtles?
And of course, we don't want any kind of bad influences going into our waterways because of the turtles. Now, along those lines, we used to always say recycle, reuse, reduce, but I actually don't start with recycle anymore. I actually start with reduce, because especially since we've seen China pull out and they're no longer buying our recyclables, and there's been conversation about changing or eliminating our recycle structure in Broward County because we don't know how to recycle. Big tip, never put a Publix plastic bag in your recycle bin because they will not be able to recycle any of that recyclables in that bin. So remember that. And every time I forget to bring my own reusable bag to the grocery store, I just ask for a paper bag or I just buy less and carry it on out. So that's a very simple action. And considering that our beaches have some of the most nesting sites for sea turtles in the entire country, it's a funny thing that we still have plastic straws everywhere. And so, you know, that's part of this ripple of change that I would love to see our community, our blue backyard here, actually start to embrace, is that even if it's not coming from the governmental piece, we each can make a difference. Restaurant owners can do their part. Actually, Ocean Alley Restaurant down here in Hollywood Beach has already they've already moved away from plastics, and so they're using all kind of reusable materials. They no longer use plastic straws. And then, of course, you know, something very simple you can also do is just don't ask for a plastic straw. And if you need to drink from a straw, there's stainless steel straws, bamboo straws. There's so many really neat materials that you can use instead of. Sustainability is also about reconnecting to water. And as I alluded to, it turns out that we're finding that there's new science called blue mind science that shows that when we spend time in, on, under, or near water, there's physical and chemical changes that happen to our brains that make us calmer, more focused, more creative, and happier. And it really demonstrates, it really comes through when we're around healthy waterways. And so I truly believe that one of the reasons why we see climate change, one of the reasons why we see so many ocean issues that are happening around the world is because we become disconnected to waterways and to that piece of water. So it's just about being very mindful of our actions. Sustainable seafood, that's another thing, knowing where your seafood comes from, being conscious consumers, that's also part of the conversation. So luckily we have lots of opportunities to be involved between the sea turtle walks, between just coming here to the Meek and getting to meet Captain the Sea Turtle, which we'll do here in a little bit, and beach cleanups constantly, but then also supporting the people, the places, the restaurants, locations that are ocean friendly, that have made those moves. That's one of the biggest things we could do. Hi.
I was wondering, how do you feel about like the hobbyists, like coral collectors, and like them like buying all these illegal corals, and we have all these shops around. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the funny thing is I actually that was where my background started. I started working at public aquariums. My first job ever was taking tickets at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. I didn't care what I was doing. I was at the aquarium. It was awesome. And funny thing, I never actually had my own aquarium at home because I knew the panic of the sound that when your pump shuts off in the middle of the night, and I didn't want to have to deal with that at home. I had to deal with it at work. But there is a huge hobbyist industry for folks to have their own aquariums. I am a big supporter of the people who are doing aquaculture, who are actually raising corals in home land-based tank systems, and that they're sourcing coral fragments from that. We also see folks who are doing that with fish. They're using more aquacultured fish in those environments. people who take from the wild, it's a huge industry, and especially because we see the more colorful fishes are coming from Indonesia, Thailand, from these areas that have a lot fewer regulations than what we have. Over there, they're still using damaging fishing techniques to extract fish from the reefs. Then they're shipping them across the waterways over to our country. The survival rate of those fishes and corals that they're bringing over is very low. So it is a very damaging industry. And I think, part of that is just bringing forth the conversation amongst hobbyists. They love what they do. A lot of them are very good at what they do. And they want to have that aquarium at home. I have nothing against that. But also connecting them with the idea that it can be done so in a way that is more sustainable. They don't have to have the most rare fish or the prettiest fish out there. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
On the brighter side of taking corals out of the ocean, could you tell us, for those that aren't familiar with coral fragging, what some of the most encouraging steps are to help save the reefs?
Yeah, so there's actually a new project that has been going on. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing here on our Florida reefs is that not only do we have corals dying off, they're getting disease, they're bleaching, and they're not coming back. We've seen an ongoing disease now for the last 5 years that continues to spread. It's hitting any coral at once, basically, and so it's very devastating. So one of the projects that's come out of that is something that's been kind of labeled the Noah's Ark Project. And what Nova Southeastern University is doing, as well as a lot of other institutions, is that they're taking specific coral representatives from the wild, and then they're also breeding them and having these populations in land-based nursery, almost like a Noah's Ark. And so when the conditions improve out on our coral reefs, they'll have a land-based stock that they can then reseed the natural reef with. And actually the Florida Aquarium over in Tampa became the first to breed and to successfully start raising pillar coral, which is a beautiful coral. It literally grows in pillars. We used to have 12 colonies of them here in Broward County and Miami-Dade. Now we have 0. And this overall population in South Florida is so small that they can no longer reproduce because the colonies are so far spread. But this particular project coming out of the Florida Aquarium, where they're actually spawning these corals and they're successfully starting to raise them, is very, very promising. And again, with the idea that as water conditions improve, it's never just one thing that's affecting the corals or that's affecting any of these ecosystems. It's always the pressure of many, many different elements, between climate change, between our warming sea temperatures showing up on through bleaching and killing corals through bleaching, land-based pollutants. Some of it we actually know is causing these diseases offshore. So it's never just one stressor, it's a multitude of these stressors. And so being able to deal with the problem from all of these different angles, both raising a stock on land while also mitigating what's going on out in the reefs, and for us to be more mindful of how our actions impact the health of our waterways, all of these solutions together are what's really going to improve our coral reefs. So it's very promising. I am still very hopeful.
Yes.